it's Super Videos back at you for another video. In this video I'm going to be comparing 609, which was No Way Out, to 701, which was The Day Will Come When You Won't Be. And I'm going to talk about which episode was darker in my opinion. So in terms of the comic book, 609 was basically from the volume No Way Out, like the title itself, but for 701 it was actually part of the Something to Fear story arc. So in terms of the two episodes and which was darker, first let's look at individually what kind of things they each had that kind of contributed to them being very dark. For 609, the main things that made the episode so dark were, one, Carl and getting shot and everything and losing the eye and the emotional impact it had on Rick, and also just the whole visual look of Carl getting shot, so how brutal it was. That added to how dark it was. And then also the massacre of the Anderson family. We have Sam getting ripped to pieces and Sam being a little kid. That was very brutal, and it added a lot to the emotional impact of it, as well to how dark the episode was. And then Ron shooting Carl in the face, making him lose the eye. Of course it was accidental, but still. Michonne stabbing him in the back. It's very dark stuff. We basically have Jesse giving up and letting the walkers get her. That was very emotional. It was brutal and it really got to you. But the part that really got to me, at least, was the part where Rick had to cut Jesse's arm off in order to save his son. And the flashbacks that they had with the red visual, that was very dark, it was very brutal, and it was just very emotional. Now in terms of anything else, the episode didn't have too much else that contributed to how dark it was, other than it being a very dark episode as a whole, because of the feeling that there's walkers everywhere and that they truly don't have a way out and they have to face this, and there will definitely be casualties like we saw. So in terms of that, it was very dark. But then if we look at 701 with a continuation of Negan's introduction and basically the saviors surrounding the survivors, much like the walkers were surrounding the survivors in No Way Out, and the whole sequence with Negan picking out someone to die, and of course it being Abraham, and how brutal that was. Even Abraham's death, I feel like it was very brutal. We got the impact. We actually got to see the bat interact with the skull, which made it very brutal, very dark. But also, when he kept hitting him, that also added to the emotional level and also how dark it was. But then, the part where we have Abraham on the ground, and then we have a close-up on it, Negan just keeps on going. That was very brutal, and it added a lot to how dark the episode was. Even with Negan taunting Rosita and putting the bloody bat on her face and kind of bragging about it a little bit, that was very dark as well. It added to how insane that sequence was. But then what really got to everyone, in my opinion, was Glenn's death, because it was shocking, it was surprising, it was out of nowhere. And Glenn being one of the most favorite characters of the show and also the comic book, but just seeing him go like that after thinking that he was safe. Negan got Abraham, that was very emotional, that was sad, but then Glenn is alive. And then what happens is Negan kind of punishes Glenn for Daryl's actions. And again, that's what was really dark about it, was it wasn't really the action of someone else, of the villain, that led to Glenn's death, but it was the actions of one of our favorites, Daryl Dixon, that led to Glenn's death. So that added a lot of emotional impact and also added to how dark it was. But then, of course, with the visual of how brutal it was, because Glenn has the eye popping out and everything, and he's struggling to get his words out, and once he finally does, he says, "I'll find you to Maggie," and it's just emotional, it's dark, and it's very sad. And then to follow up on that, again, Negan keeps on hitting Glenn as he's on the ground, and the visual look, we see him twitching and everything like that. That added a lot to how brutal it was. Now, in terms of a comparison between 609 and 701 and which was darker, in my opinion, as dark as 609 was, I think 701 just took it to a whole new level and made it really dark, really emotional, really gritty, and just out of this world sad. So because of that, I'm gonna go with 701. I think 701 was darker as a whole than 609 because it wasn't just about the visual look of the deaths themselves. It was about how connected we were to those characters and how well we knew them and how attached we were to them and how brutal their death was. And for Glenn, how surprising it was, how shocking it was. Where for 609, the deaths that we saw, it was from the Anderson family, so we weren't as attached to them as we were to Glenn and Abraham. And also, the only real big impact that 609 had for people who were attached to the characters was basically Carl and how he lost his eye. But I'm very interested to know your opinions. What do you think about this? Which episode do you see as being a darker episode as a whole, in terms of how emotional it was, how sad it was, how brutal it was, how depressing it was, all of those things. So share your thoughts in the comment section below. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.